Hey, quick question. If I took this photograph and turned it into black and white, would it still work? Because here's the wild thing. Your brain actually reads light and dark first before it even notices hue. So today I want to go through what is value and why it is so important to include it in your paintings. Today I want to show you step by step how I use value in watercolors to turn a flat photograph into a solid three-dimensional Roman mask and one of my favorite suns. This is also inspired by a sculpture that I saw in the Vatican, making an absolutely ridiculous face. And yes, this face works because of value. Value is simply how light or dark something is. That's it. No mystery. But here's the important part. Value is the main tool artists use to show form and shape. Before the Renaissance, artists, they figured this out. Paintings were basically flat cartoons. And then like Leonardo da Vinci, he initially wrote that without light and shadows, art really is dead. So no pressure. In watercolor, value is extra important because once the paper is dark, it's pretty difficult to make it lighter. An important tool that I highly recommend is a grayscale value finder. This basically goes from 1 to 10 on the different value scales. You can notice that it starts off down here with brilliant white and it makes its way up all the way to dark. Now, wait until the end of the video and I'll show you how I use this on my paintings to be able to see how the value is working and if I need to push it even further. But I definitely recommend that if you don't have one, pick one up at the local hobby store or Amazon. It's a great way to be able to value your paintings. Step 1, before I paint anything, I decide where the darkest darks and the lightest lights live. I like to think in 3 value groups at first. The first is light, the second is mid-tones, and the third is dark. So in the example of the Roman mask, it's perfect for this because it basically is a study of planes, the forehead, the nose, the cheeks, the eye sockets, the wavy hair. So if your value structure works in 3 tones, everything else is just a bonus detail. The other example I have is my son Grant, where this is a monochromatic painting. This is where you do the exact same thing, but you use a single color. And here I've used ultramarine purple as the example. But you can still see that in the process, I wanted to determine where all the lights were, the mid-tones, and then the darkest darks, like the rims of the glasses and the dark of his suit coat that he's wearing in the deep dark shadows. The process is the same if it's using just black and white or monochromatic. You can follow the exact same process. So after you have your initial sketch and you want to protect your whites, either using a masking fluid or masking tape or just knowing where you want to paint around, what you want to start off with is a very light wash first. Because in watercolor, value, it works backwards. You don't paint the white, you want to protect the white. So I start with a very light wash, just enough pigment to define the overall shape, both in my sun and of the mask. I'm not thinking details at all yet. I'm thinking big shapes. Where does the light hit? Where do the planes face the light? Think of this like you're laying the foundation of a building. You wouldn't want to install kitchen cabinets before pouring the concrete. And the initial first wash basically is pouring the concrete on your painting. I recently had someone ask me why do I like using monochromatic or the value to be able to work through my painting. One of the main reasons is I'm following the steps of the old masters. If you study Rembrandt or Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo, oftentimes what they would do is paint their subject first in a monochromatic format. Some would call it in a way as a death mask. because before the portrait was complete, they would use one color, typically a blue, and they would put all the values in that they're looking for. And then they would add the color afterward. The next step is to add an additional wash on top of your first one. This step is where the painting really starts to feel three-dimensional because the mid-tones start to get recognized. The mid-tones, they do really most of the work. That's where it connects lights to the darks. Now there's different ways you can apply these mid-tones. You can either remove the existing layer, first wash, or add that next layer on top of them. One of the ways or techniques I like to do is after you put new pigment on, you want to come back with clean water around the edges because that creates a smoother edge rather than a hard edge. Especially when it comes to skin or round objects, hard edges are something you're trying to avoid. So notice I'm grouping the shadows together instead of outlining the features. If you want to outline, flatten, it really flattens things. And you want to remember that your value is building up the volume that you see. Here's actually a fun art fact for you artists out there. Studies have really shown that the human eye can distinguish thousands of values, but when it comes to colors, it only can distinguish a few hundred colors. So if the value is wrong, it doesn't matter what color choice you can use, it really won't save the painting. After you've got your lights and your midtones, now comes what I actually enjoy the most, is the dark darks, the contrast. This is where a painting truly comes to life in my mind. The darkest darks, they really go in last, and there's also a few of them. If I was going to break down percentage-wise, typically around less than 10% of my picture, in this particular case, 10% are the darkest darks, maybe even less. But that's important because the darker your darks, the highlights of your whites will definitely stand out. So these shadows, like under the eyes, the mouth, this is really what gives the mask kind of an expression overall. Even in the example of my son, the darkness of his smile and the shadows around his eyes and kind of around his chin give the shape, you know, that he's an actual real human being. So that jump in value, that's the question. That's what makes the sculpture feel carved instead of painted. A couple of tricks, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, of why this is important and how to use it, this grayscale and value finder, is towards the end of my project, what I like to do is use this value finder and to compare the darks of where I have the darkest in comparison to the lights of where I have my light. Now, if I find that the majority of my painting are just following into these mid-tone values, then I know I haven't pushed it far enough. For an example, the dark of this mouth, I actually put like 3 or 4 layers of dark just to make sure that it was dark enough, as well as in here around the darkest parts of the hair. Now, when it comes to a monochromatic painting, as an example, I can still use this same value finder even though this is in black and white, and I can use it with this monochromatic because I can still come in here and compare the darks that I have in comparison to where some of the lights, like up in here with his hair. And as long as that value is found, even within a monochromatic, then you'll be able to see that the shape and the overall picture will look better to the eye. The Roman mask and my son work not because of fancy brushwork, but because the light and dark shapes are clear. So if this helped, check out episode 5 of Painting My Vacation, where this painting came from, and let me know in the comments if you want a deeper dive into the value studies you can practice in under 10 minutes. Because mastering value is how watercolor stops being scary and starts being fun. And boom, here they are. Both examples of how value can improve your overall painting and pictures. If you haven't had an opportunity yet, check out episode 5 of Painting My Vacation. That's where the inspiration came to paint this Roman mask while we were visiting the Vatican. And remember, if you haven't had an opportunity, hit that subscribe button below and the like button so you don't miss out on any further content. Hey, let's pick up our brushes and enjoy painting.